Hi and welcome to Bite-Sized Bat Reps. So we have another by far and so report for you, and this time around I have my now fully painted Ottoman force taking on some Crimean Khanate Tatars. And I'm actually really excited about this game because this is the first time I'm facing the Tatar horde with the Ottomans, and when playing as Sweden I always had a really hard time dealing with their skirmishing cavalry and all the bow fire. So I'm really curious to see how the Ottomans handle this situation, given that they also have the fast horses and have some pretty deadly bowmen of their own. So the scenario ends up being defend a village, and a couple things to go through. The Tatars came in, I think, with 13 points, so it's a pretty big force. They have a bunch of rabble on, I think, both sides, the Tatar elite and 2 commanders. And I have my standard kind of full skirmish force, and I'm supposed to be defending the village. Now, I chose this scenario because the other option I had was delay the enemy, and I figured that it would be very difficult for me to prevent Tatars from driving off the other side of the map if they were really trying to do so. And I thought that I can kind of put some infantry in the village and defend it, and it would all work out. But this is where some of the Ottoman fine points coming. So the infantry is very cheap. You get 6 bases for 1 point. That's fantastic. They're really poor shots, but they're also really inflexible. I had 2 points that I could spend on this village, or on putting bases in it. And for 2 points, I can get 5 bases in there, not 6, 5. That means I couldn't get my whole unit in, and I can't split units, and they're a 6 base single unit, which means that I actually had to defend the village with no one deployed, except for my commander, or the second, the subordinate commander, which is kind of horrible because that means I have no bases defending the village right off the bat. But that's fine. We'll see how the scenario plays out. Quick look down the line. So the Tatars, more Tatars, and my Ottomans. I have some Beshli with spears, so they're pretty punchy actually, considering that they're light cavalry. I really like using them. I have some Sipahi. I have more Sipahi. Here's my Crimean infantry, and I guess another shot of them from the other side. And we kick off, and right off the bat, 2 things happen that are super important. So one is my opponent, being a Tatar force, obviously has way more reconnaissance than I do, and he chooses to do 2 forced marches. And he forced marches this group and this group. And that's terrible because that means he can put all these bases, so that's what, there's like 5 here and 2 here. So 7 bases into the village right off the bat. And once they're in the village, they'll take it over, and it'll be really hard for me to win it back. So at this point I'm very worried, and I kind of figure that this might be a really frustrating game. But I had one effect, which was panic. Got lucky on that, and then we rolled to see which unit got it, and I got super lucky because it was this unit here. So he force marched them, and then panic struck because I guess they saw this whole Ottoman army approaching the village to defend it. So they decided that instead of piling into the village, they'll actually withdraw, which is huge because, yes, he still has these 2 bases that can get in the village and cause some problems, but he won't have like a massed army in the village. So I'm very happy about this. This is like, I think, the most important role of the entire game, but it's good. I'm off to a good start. Okay, so let's go through turn 1. I give the initiative to my opponent, and he, not surprisingly, takes those 2 bases of the Tatars and drives them into the village so that he can contest it, and just moves the rest of his army up. And these guys are still disorganized, so that's nothing surprising there. Now for myself, I come up with one idea that I thought was my only chance to kind of not get the village plundered, right? So these 2 bases will now be able to plunder the village. I figure that if I can get these Sipahi on the bottom, a charge order all the way to the other side of the map, obviously they won't make it, but if they can hold on to the order, they can basically drive into the village and contest it. So they're good, they have 3 bases. So that's what I decide to do, and the rest of my army ends up just moving up. So I've got both flanks advancing. Infantry marches straight towards the village so that they can get into those buildings later on. They will be very important. And my Sipahi force, or these 3 bases, are trying to get across the village and just get in there and basically contest it. I put my lances on the left, no particular reason, that's just how the deployment worked, and I think to match that my opponent put his elites on the right, so they're on the opposite sides, which is not good for me because I'd rather have my lances hitting his elites. And that is it, I think, for interesting things from the first move. A little bit of a close-up on my galloping Spahi. So they're trying to get through, make it, and my commander just moves out of the way a little bit so that he can not get trampled in, not stop them. So the charge is complete, and these guys test their skill, and unfortunately they fail. So from here they kind of drove up to here for the 15-ish, and then fail, and then move back 10. And unfortunately, because now they're disorganized, they're too far away from this middle point to contest it. So it does get plundered at the end of this turn. My super clever ploy did not work, but I thought it was worth a try. It's kind of the only thing I could figure of doing to not lose those points right away. Okay, let's go to turn 2. Luckily, I do manage to rally these guys, so they'll be back in the fight, which is important because otherwise they'd be sitting ducks. And I think I take the initiative this time around. And so at this point, what I'm thinking is, I'm lucky that that force up top is still not rallied, so that's good. But he's got a lot of cavalry on this right flank that, uncontested, like if I let him have the initiative, he would have just been able to drive it straight in here, and I'd have the same problem of having 7 or 8 Tatar bases sitting in the village, where I'd have to try to dig them out. So I want to be really aggressive with my cavalry and just push them back and force them to either engage me right away or fall back and stay away from the village, right? Given that that's what we're playing for. So that's what I do, is I throw a charge order on the Spahi here, and they charge up. The Tatars here break, not break, but break off. Sorry, that's the rule. They break off and they pull back to here. And in the middle, what I do is in the village, these 3 bases of Spahi also get a charge order, and they charge into these Tatars here, which are easy pickings, and they have nowhere to flee because they'll get crushed against this building. And so that's what ends up happening, is I come in here, fight I guess 1 round, they lose and get destroyed. But they already plundered, so they kind of did their job. It was a very good trade on my opponent's side. Infantry moves in, and again, this is just those little placements. The way the Tatars were placed at movement phase, the building was too close, and so they were blocking it, so I was actually unable to man it this turns, even though I might have had the orders if it was able to. But this building was basically blocked out, so I couldn't put any infantry in it, so I'm just driving my infantry around so that I can staff it at some other point in the game. And my opponent's movement, not much happens. He takes his elites and pulls them back so that I don't incidentally contact them with this charging wave. So he basically pulls his cavalry back this way. We engage on the right side. My Beshli also with spears charge up, and they engage the Tatars, so we'll have a small skirmish here. And on the left, I just kind of drive up, and my opponent is skirmishing and screening on the left side as well. A little bit of a closer look at this charge, and I run up to about here, I think, and then unfortunately also not manage to keep my charge, so I lose. I fail the skill test and get disorganized and pull back. So now these guys are sitting here disorganized, which is terrible. But on the upside, they did prevent all of this cavalry from driving into the village. So yeah, it's a little bit of a sideways thing. See how it goes. All right, this encounter goes really well for me. So I smack in with 6, especially with spears, versus these 4 Tatars, and win it fairly easily. And they actually end up rolling really badly for leadership and fleeing. And in the follow-through charge move, the Beshli hit the elite Tatars who were sitting here, and they engage them on the side and fight one round, and we both, with all of our attacks, I win, but my opponent passes his morale, and so he just withdraws in good order, which is not ideal. I was really counting that with this flank charge I might have gotten lucky and gotten these guys to get disorganized, which would have been huge, and if and kind of disrupt this whole line. But as it is, they're just turned to face and sit there. All right, and end of turn 3 looks like this. So my cavalry kind of pushed in here, but these guys are exposed. They're sitting surrounded by Tatars, and my left side is looking pretty good, so I'll be looking to consolidate, and village is mine again. It's been plundered, but at least I have a bunch of bases in there now, so it won't be such easy pickings. A little bit more of a close-up of the village. Alright, turn 3. My opponent goes first, and I unfortunately do not manage to rally these guys. They are still disorganized, which is terrible, because he does rally these Tatars, and so now this is kind of hopeless, because these guys are out of place. So that's basically not going to go very well for my guys. And let's get to the movement. So my opponent does double charge my Sipahi from front and side, and so this unit is going to definitely lose, and so I kind of reposition my commander this way because they'll be fleeing this way, and so I want to make sure that I can still rally them. The Lance Sipahi charge, and because they have the fast horses, they should be able to just barely catch these Tatars, and I want to push them away, right? So again, just keep them away from the village, so I can maybe swing around to the right and kind of protect the rest of my cavalry. So these guys are swinging this way, and the other especially are swinging towards the village. And in the village itself, my infantry is still dancing around, so I actually didn't have enough command points to give them a defend order and get them in the village because they are insubordinate, so I need to do this later. But this turn I was not able to get it done. Alright, this combat I barely make it, so we have like just a couple bases fighting, and we end up tying, but because I have lances I win, and my opponent fails the morale and gets disorganized and then pushed back, and we fight again, and I think I don't do anything after in the second phase, and we basically we bounce, which is really disappointing. Now in this turn, this combat, so my Sipahi actually don't even get to fight. They lose a base due to shooting while charging from all of this incoming charging bows, and because they were already disorganized, they failed their morale test and flee away from combat. And they kind of flee this way, they get pursued by both Tatar units, they take some more hits, and then flee a bit more, and then kind of end up here. That's actually probably better. I think they lost fewer bases than they would have if they just got hammered on by all of the cavalry. So that's fine. Now that was expected. Now this part, you might notice that my Beshli with spears are missing, and that is extremely disappointing because yes, the elite Tatars charge into my Beshli with spears. I whipped all my attacks and lost the combat by not much, I think like 1 or 2 max, but I rolled a 10 for morale and just fled straight off the table. So that was extremely disappointing because that was like 6 bases without any damage on them yet. Just like fleeing off the table, gone. Yeah. And yeah, the second turn these guys flee and position themselves here. Alright, so this is the end of the turn. So as I said, top right, my Sipahi bounced, so we were kind of here, but my opponent is still disorganized, so that's not too bad. At least this cavalry is slowed down a little bit, and they're not at the village, which is the most important thing. The right side is looking really, really badly, so he's got the elite Tatars who are still completely unwounded, and 2 units of regular Tatars who are just hanging around. And I don't have that much defending the village, so I'm a little bit worried because yes, I've got some other units here, but they're far away. So this is not great. Alright, beginning of turn 4. Big news is the Spahi that were fleeing on the right side rally. So now I've got a whole bunch of bases on the right side, which is great because then his cavalry can't just ignore me and like pile into the village. They have to take these guys into account, which is huge. And what else happened? The command phrase. I think these guys up top did not rally either, which is great. So they're still disorganized. So I have, again, a bit more time. Looking inside the village, I started getting ready for the kind of my last stand. So I put defend on these, on the cavalry here, and throw a defend on my infantry, so that I can start staffing the buildings, which is going to be extremely important. All right, movement. So 2 interesting things. My opponent is now just getting his cavalry going this way, and I'm not sure why he decided to do this, but he took the 6 bases and is charging my now rallied Spahi instead of charging into the village. And the good news for me is that these guys are in good order, so they don't have a charge order, but at least they're formed up and ready to fight, and they actually can fight quite well, so I'm looking forward to this engagement. It might not be too bad for me. In my movement phase, I just, on the left side, my Spahi without orders withdraw. The light cavalry is swinging around it to get into the village, and I got some infantry finally in the building, so I'm feeling a bit more secure. It's turn 4, and I've got a whole bunch of bases in the village, so it's starting to look pretty good. Alright, let's look at this engagement now. So you've got, 5 bases fighting with a base behind versus my 2, 3, 4 bases. So I am outnumbered, but this is kind of like the well-armored, heavier cavalry, and I get pretty lucky in the rolls because I actually end up, I did lose a base, but I killed I think 2 bases, which is really, really lucky. And my opponent does pass his leadership test, but he loses, and so he gets pushed back. And in the second turn, we end up tying and just falling back on both sides. So both units are still in the fight, but at least, again, I'm super happy that these guys are kind of far away. And this is the end of turn 4. So I've got, again, a bunch of Tatars on this side, but my left flank is looking pretty good. And the village is much more secure now. Alright, turn 5. I get the initiative this time around, and the first thing I do is I drive all the cavalry I can into the village, because I'm going to be making sure that it's staffed as much as possible. My lancers withdraw, and my opponent, the important thing is that he does rally these guys up to the top of the table, so they are back in the game. And close-up of the now fully Ottoman village. And the Tatars who are milling about and looking for trouble. Alright, my opponent's movement. So, top left, he declares a charge with these Tatars against my Lancers. It's a very long charge, but he actually will make it. Just the way the movement's worked out. There's, I think, one base that'll connect. On this side, on the right side, he does 2 things. So he kind of withdraws with this horde with because they have no orders. This larger unit moves down, and they're going to be engaging me with bowfire, which is not a bad idea given how deadly they can be, while his elites are getting brought up to basically into the village so that they can charge and attack. And as I mentioned, yeah, one base does make it, and so we fight on the left side. And at the beginning of the engagement, I'm feeling pretty good about this because, again, I've got formed up Sipahi, with shields, and they have higher morale. So this is how bad could it be. But it turns out it could be really bad. So I whip all my rolls, and I think I had like 2 attacks. I whip them all both, take a bunch of wounds, and roll a 10 for morale and flee. which was very disappointing. So my lancers were not very good at, and it's kind of a funny thing where these are the very same guys they fought before, right? So this is this like Tatar horde they chased off first, and then Tatars regrouped, cut their breath, and charged right back down and chased the Ottomans away. And turn 5 we exchange some bowfire, so I take some wounds, my opponent takes some wounds, but not much else happens. And turn 6, so this is the last turn, so this is where it either all comes together or doesn't. Important things, my lancers at least rally, thank goodness, so they're not going to be casualties at the end of the game. They can't do anything, but they're on the board. I put a bunch of defend orders here so that I can maximize my bowfire, and my opponent puts in some charge orders and tries to break into the village. And just a close-up at this kind of last stand. Okay, so a whole bunch of charges this way, and these Tatars move around because he wants to be, I guess, causing more damage with bows, and I think there was kind of no room for him to charge, so I guess he decided not to bother. But as things would have it, my infantry, which is horrible at shooting, managed to get one wound into the Tatars, and they were at close range, and these are poor firearms, but they're still firearms, so these guys have to test morale, and they fail, and they withdraw. Which doesn't actually affect anything in terms of casualties, but they're not going to be shooting at my village with anything, with any useful shots, so I'm very happy about this, and this was kind of cinematic where they just danced around these buildings, took a bunch of gunfire, and just pulled back. Alright, and now the main event. So these elite Tatars who are still unhurt, they have all of their wounds, they're full of their victories on the other side of the field, charge into the Beshli, take a bunch of bowfire coming in, but are actually quite successful. So they win this round of combat, and my Beshli fail and actually flee across a couple of units, which fortunately pass their morale tests. So both my Spahi here and the infantry pass, and the Tatars then smash into a couple more well-formed cavalry units, and they bounce. So they lose, and they get pushed back out of the village. So I'm very happy about that. And that is the end of the game. The village is obviously in the Ottoman hands, so I win it, get 4 points, but it's plundered, so my opponent gets 2 points, and we're even on casualties, so I end up with a basically a 2-point win. So minor, very minor victory. Couple of quick thoughts about how this game went and what I thought about the Ottomans and the Tatars. The Tatars are just as deadly. I mean, they're shooting on 5 with all of this bowfire was causing me lots of problems, and their break off was also quite problematic. But the game could have gone a lot worse. So I mean, I got super lucky with this horde, withdrawing at the beginning of the game instead of getting into the village. That would have been quite painful. I also like this idea that the the Ottoman infantry is kind of tactically inflexible. So they're cheap, they don't shoot very well, but they also can be ordered around. So the fact that they can't staff the village was, I think, annoying, but I think it was kind of fun and worked out. And past that, this scenario just shows again that all skirmishing on the sides is just a distraction. So if you're charged with attacking the village, attack the village, because you might not get enough rounds or turns in the game to do it afterwards. So some of these units, instead of swinging up down here near this right side and chasing me, should have just been piling into the village, and even if they stood around and started bow firing me to death, it would have been very effective. Alright, that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.